Welcome back to what is the last session of the day, but I'm sure this is going to be as interesting as anything that's gone before. What we've already heard a lot about this morning and this afternoon is the importance of health data sharing and the need to build trust as part of the solutions to have health data sharing at scale. So this session is really about how to facilitate more access to health data for research. And it's an introduction to the Societal Compact. So first of all, a little introduction to Professor Dipak Kalra, who is the president of the European Institute for Innovation Through Health Data, IHD. Dipak is a leading international figure in research and development of electronic health records and the reuse of EHRs for research. He's a GP by profession originally and has spent 25 years on the development of standards for EHR interoperability, and he leads on multiple EU Horizon 2020 and IMI projects. He's a professor of health informatics at University College London and a visiting professor at the University of Ghent. Perhaps more importantly for me, he's a collaborator with me, and he and I and our two organizations have for the last 4 years created a roundtable program. And one of the products of the roundtable program and the collaboration is today's presentation on a proposal for a societal compact. So Dipak, over to you.
Bleddyn, thank you very much. And perhaps while the title slide is loading, I can say that despite my name being on the slide, the work I'm going to be presenting, the compact, is a double act with Bleddyn and many other stakeholders. So I'm just the spokesperson. I hope you like it, but if not, don't shoot the messenger. So next slide, please. Let's first begin with a little bit of context, which perhaps may have been echoed already through the day, which is that health systems have really almost a medical emergency to transform. This slide is actually several years old, but surprisingly enough, it remains relevant, and that's why I've got it for you first. We are still in a position, which is not surprising, after the COVID crisis, that we are struggling to have enough public funding to pay for everything that health systems would like to achieve, including catching up on a backlog that arose during COVID. At the same time, we have rising demands for healthcare as we are aging and growing in the number of diseases, comorbidities that we have. And at the same time, there is a really strong societal drive to ensure that health is delivered equitably to all sectors of society. So with all of that, there is no doubt that health systems have to transform, but how do we learn about that transformation? The next slide, please. So on this slide, you've got 3 columns, and I'll just speak to each of the 3 columns very briefly. If we're looking at individuals and the care given to individuals, we still need a lot of learning to do from data about how we can best optimize care through the collection and use of health outcomes. We still need to put effort into optimizing care pathways and joining up continuity of care across, especially across healthcare provider organizations. There is, especially post-COVID, a recognition that telehealth and the delivery of care to individuals that involves those individuals with digital tools is a very powerful way of supporting individuals better and making best use of resources. We want to do more that's personalized and more that's preventive. In the middle column, at the population level, we need to learn from our data more than we do today so that we can ensure that we architect health services and plan the use of resources in the most efficient way we can, that we continue and extend the monitoring of quality and safety, including pharmacovigilance. And I probably don't need to tell you about the importance of public health. I think we're all only able to resurface out of our hideouts post-COVID because we had excellent public health strategies as well as vaccines, but with still a recognition that public health systems were not as agile and in information sharing as they could be, and therefore we have work to do to improve on that. And then on the research side, using even bigger data resources, understanding diseases better, developing drugs, vaccines, and innovative digital tools, including AI. So this is a landscape that basically says we badly need to accelerate our ability to learn from health data. So next slide, please. But there is a challenge with achieving that, and that is with gaining public support. Irrespective of our adherence to data protection, the GDPR, the public are concerned to know about, and they do care about, how their health data gets used. And what we find as we go from left to right on this slide through the colors that I showed you previously, the public understand less and less about why and how their data get used. The actors involved in performing analytics and developing innovations may be unfamiliar to them. It takes a long time for the results of research, especially, to translate back into products and services that deliver value. And that value might not even accrue back to the patient whose data was used. It may be that the innovation is useful to other patients. Maybe the patient was too far advanced by the time of this innovation and couldn't benefit from something. So the public feel more and more concerned about how their data gets used as we move towards larger scale data uses, pan-European data scale uses, and as we move away from healthcare delivery innovation more towards pure research. Next slide, please. So where are we on that scale? What we find is that if we focus on data protection regulations, they focus very much on individuals, on protecting and safeguarding the rights of individuals when their data gets used, with which I have no challenge. But we have on the opposite side to balance that with the needs for clinical research, which brings benefit not to individuals so much, but to society as a whole, or to large chunks of society. Now, we know that when we spend time, really invest in educating patients about what research can deliver and how data can be used to enable research, they are mostly in favor of that data use. And so we need to think about how we can achieve a balance here in which there are enough promises, societal commitments that can be made so the public feel that their data are being used for good purposes, but being used carefully by bona fide organizations who uphold good practices, and that there is more transparency. And that is the balance we have to find between the first line on this slide, safeguarding the individual's rights, and the second line on this slide, bringing benefits to society. The next slide, please. We have within Europe regulations that actually sit on both sides of the scale. We have the GDPR, which I imagine most of you are familiar with, which really does uphold the rights of individuals to have limits on how their data gets used. On the other hand, the Data Governance Act, which opens the door on channels whereby individuals can give consent to trusted third parties, not-for-profit third parties by and large, who can use the data multiply through others to help achieve some of those societally beneficial objectives. And in the middle of the scales, I've put on this slide a series of things that I believe are the safeguards and assurances that the public need in order to feel confident about the right-hand side of this slide as opposed to the left, that we respect their preferences, we promise to only use their data for acceptable purposes, and so on. And one of those most important safeguards is that they know that the organizations who are using their data will abide by all of these good practices. And so then the next slide, please, introduces you to something that is called a proposal for a societal compact for the secondary use of health data. And this is a proposal that we have developed with good colleagues in order to try to help the public and decision makers to determine the basis on which organizations should be trusted with health data and why they should be trusted. But equally, the organizations that we often know and work with want to find a way of demonstrating that they are good users of health data, that they are trustworthy. And of course, there is very, very widely a recognition that everybody needs greater transparency about health data use than we have today. Next slide, please. So what is a societal compact? I put in brackets or social contract because that's a term that I've used in the past and others have used in the past to describe this kind of instrument. And it is a voluntary agreement in that organizations don't have to sign it, but it's binding if they do. And it's an agreement that they make in order to show that they are upholding good practices, working to use data towards societal benefits. The aim of this compact, which is something that we really want to test out in the real world, is that it actually does provide a sufficient level of assurance to all stakeholders, and especially to the public, that the organizations that sign this compact and are using data according to this compact do so in legal, ethical, and secure ways, and that this ensures the public can be confident that their data is being used in society's interests. Next slide, please. So how did we develop it? Well, as Bleddyn indicated, we were running a series of multi-stakeholder expert groups, mostly in the later part of 2022. But we didn't start from scratch. We brought into the group thinking and work done over the previous 15 years on what might be some of the principles and good practices around using data. And I've put at the bottom of this slide a link to it. And actually, we've done a series of roundtables. So, sorry, the link at the bottom of this slide is not to this compact. It's to the original calls to action report that Bleddyn and I co-authored with colleagues that set the scene on a whole series of reports that you can also find there. We've undertaken in early 2023 some consultations with a draft version of this, and the version that I'm talking you through now is, if you like, a second version that builds on the feedback we've received. But we're very keen now to have a bit more experience, especially at the level, if possible, of regions or nations that want to put this into practice and see whether it achieves the objectives we've developed it for. Next slide, please. So what's inside the box? What does this compact contain? The important things it contains are a set of ethical principles that I'll explain, the permitted and prohibited purposes for reusing health data, which we have deliberately matched with the forthcoming European Health Data Space regulation, although that regulation is not yet final, and we may then need to update it when the regulation is final. It comprises a set of commitments that a data user needs to agree that they will always uphold when they use data to achieve one of the permitted purposes. And then there are some governance and operational models, which I won't go into too much today. Next slide, please. So ethical principles, there are 7. The first one is that health data must only ever be used for purposes that result in or contribute to bringing benefits to society in terms of improved opportunities for better health and care. That the data must never be reused for purposes that are unethical, violate human rights, or disadvantage individuals or groups. And that any data user must always safeguard the privacy of the individuals within the data they're using. That means they comply with the GDPR, they adopt good quality, high state-of-the-art security and privacy-preserving measures. They use aggregated or anonymized data internally whenever they can, even if they've been granted pseudonymized data. Next slide, please. That they should respect the terms and conditions that might be set by the person granting them data access. and that they should always seek that the results from using the data are in some way published or shared or productized or made available. They should some way get out into the real world, and that can include making commercial products and services that are then marketed into health systems at fair pricing. And they also must make every effort to be transparent. The last of these ethical principles is actually for the bodies that are granting permission to others to use data, that should make sure these rules are followed. Next slide, please. So here you have, in a crisp and rather summarized form, the permitted and prohibited purposes that are in the European Health Data Space Regulation. I'll just quickly speak to them, but I guess you're probably able to read faster than I can speak. But as you might expect, the permitted purposes include public interests towards supporting public health and occupational health, cross-border threats, surveillance, safety of medicines, and so on, supporting public bodies such as medicines regulators with any evidence from data that they might need, statistics relating to health and care, which enables health systems to learn and know how they can improve. Then there's education and scientific research using data for health or care. The scientific research aspect is not strongly elaborated in the draft regulation, but we've got some extra. I've got a slide on that in a moment. And then providing personalized healthcare. On the prohibited side, anything that might harm individuals or societies or have detrimental effects on people based on their data, decisions that might exclude people or groups from the benefits of insurance or modify their contributions. You can't use the learning from data to strongly promote your product to health professionals, and you can't use a backdoor model of giving the data to somebody else to do the red things because you're not permitted to. So these are the things that are in the draft regulation. And of course, we will update the proposed societal compact if these evolve, because we want to ensure strong alignment with the European Health Data Space Regulation. Next slide, please. I won't go through all of these bullets, but what we've got in the compact is an elaboration of the research, because research as a general term isn't very clear to people, and we wanted to include a list, but it is examples. This is not intended to be exhaustive. Probably no exhaustive list could ever be made, but we wanted anybody who reads the proposal document to understand the real richness of the possibilities of research, because it is an exciting, innovative space, and there are lots of ways in which health data delivers benefits. And we wanted everybody to realize that all of these things are considered in the compact to be capable of delivering societal benefits for better health. Next slide, please. We've done a similar thing with the prohibited purposes. When we worked with our brainstorming colleagues, we looked at the EHDS list and felt there were quite a lot of additional things we would want to outlaw. And I suspect most of you, hopefully all of you in the audience, would agree with that we would never want data used for anything that would violate the European Convention on Human Rights. We shouldn't be endorsing the use of data for a study that has failed to gain ethical approval. If an ethics committee has said no, we should definitely not say yes. We shouldn't do anything like weapons development or research into biological weapons, drugs for capital punishment, politically motivated research, direct marketing or research that would be deemed illegal. So I won't go through these in great detail, but you get a sense that there are a series of things. I mean, we hope that none of the organizations that want to use data that we would work with ever would want to do those things. But we felt it's important, and when we engaged in the past with patient organizations, they felt having an explicit statement about these kinds of banned areas of data use were comforting and reassuring, and that the public should see that these things are absolutely ruled out and would be strongly punished if they were used. for those purposes. Next slide, please. Assuming that an organization agrees to the ethical principles and wants to use data for one of the permitted purposes, there is then a relatively detailed, I think it's 3 or 4 pages, of commitments they have to agree to. And this is really a list of the headings of those commitments. They must agree that they will only use the data for the declared purposes that they requested for, that they will declare publicly what the intended societal benefit is from their intended use. They'll always make sure, if they're using personal data, that they have a legal basis for doing so. And if there are any other permissions, such as ethics committee permissions required for their intended data study, that they obtain them. That they will always use robust data protection practices and information security practices. That they declare upfront what they intend to do with the results of the analysis. They're going to make a drug, they're going to make a vaccine, they're going to publish an academic paper, an AI algorithm. That every organization that is a regular user of data has probably on its website, a place where people from the public can go and find out, how does this organization use health data? Sorry, what are the kinds of activities that are going on? What kinds of data does it use? And then when the data results are available, that they update the register and say, well, what happened as a consequence? Yes, we've produced a drug. Yes, we've made regulatory submission for something. Yes, there's a product on the market now. Yes, here's a link to the paper we've published and so on. So that the whole of the data use story is not only robust, but it's transparent in terms of what was the value that came out of it. Next slide, please. This is a slide that's so busy I'm not going to present it, but I just want to reassure you that in the document we have thought through how might this be put into operational practice? What kind of workflow would happen in order to put this into real life? And there's quite a bit of text. Each of these blocks in the diagram has a number, and in the document there is a paragraph or 2 that explains per number what happens in the workflow. I won't go into it except to say that the workflow includes what happens if a body that is orchestrating the workflow learns about a breach and what they might do about it, which is important because promises without enforcement don't carry much weight. So that's all part of what this specifies. Next slide, please. So as I said earlier, where are we now? We're very keen to get countries really around the world. So although we've started, this was given birth to in Europe, really there's almost nothing in here that is unique to Europe. And we would be very keen to find countries anywhere in the world that want to pilot this. We're very keen to reduce the bias we have today in the data set. So we think opening up societal confidence in the use of data will increase the uses of data and democratize both data availability and democratize research. Bleddyn and I are very happy to support anybody that wants to pilot it. So please contact us. And the next slide tells you how you can contact us. This is my last slide, Bleddyn. So just to say there's a link from your website where people can get hold of the Societal Compact document. Please download it and read it. And at the bottom of the slide, contact Bleddyn or myself or both of us and tell us what you think, if there are ways we can improve it, or if you think there might be an opportunity to pilot it. And just in the middle of the slide, a link to a news article from France, from the French Health Data Hub, which published a news article about it, so you can read about it from an independent player who's described it. Bleddyn, thank you very much for inviting me to present this to you and to your audience today. We kind of hope, you and I both hope, that this is one of the instruments among many that would help to strengthen public trust in the way data gets used, by helping organizations to prove that they can be good data users, and those organizations that might enforce the compact could help promise society that they are safeguarding the ways their data gets used.
Thank you. Excellent. We've had quite a few questions, actually.
Oh, right.
that from earlier in the slides that you answered later. But so let me just pick some of those. One of the ones that we were asked was, what are the punishments for violators who have been given trusted access? And we've just answered that in terms of the process that we've created has an investigation and has effectively a disciplinary mechanism in it. So we have covered off that. One of the points that I just like to pick up on is earlier this morning, a couple of people have mentioned this question of opt-in, opt-out for EHDS. Yes. And I think it's probably fair to say, and you were talking about the balance between the rights of individuals' privacy and the societal benefits from using health data. And even though that hadn't raised its head at the time when we started looking at the societal compact, what we were trying to do was, I think, was to increase the trust in data sharing.
Absolutely.
And that effectively, what we fear is that with an opt-out, is that if too many people opt out, we have bias in data, whether that data is used for AI or for other machine learning, which I think we both fear a great deal. So one of the things that the societal compact can do is to try and increase trust, and by doing that, avoid too many people opting out. And in the FinData session this morning, I think we heard that something like only 222 people out of 5.7 million people in Finland have opted out. So I think that we see this as a tool, don't we, to actually increase that trust.
Very much so. I mean, I think that it's, opt-in and opt-out models are very challenging to deliver across Europe at scale because they both require informed decision making. And informed decision making means informing hundreds of millions of people from diverse ethnicities, ages, educational levels is extremely difficult. And there's a risk that people will make knee-jerk reactions based on publicity, scare stories, and so on. So what we hope is the Societal Compact will create a layer of trust, because people can at least understand that with a widely adopted societal compact, they've got reasons why they should feel confident and not opt out.
Yeah. And for those people who are listening from around the world, Dipak was kind enough in September to deliver pretty much the same presentation, but this time at the United Nations Science Summit in New York. So picking up the point that he was making earlier, that we see this as being a tool that could apply anywhere in the world, we are really keen to test the concept, to learn by doing, if you like, by deploying in the real world. So if anyone wants to get involved, as Dipak was saying earlier on, we genuinely are very interested in talking to people and hearing their thoughts.
Yes, I mean, Bleddyn, if I could say, I mean, one of the reasons why, in the end, despite the vast scale of Europe and the excitement, I guess, people like me have with the European dimension, a lot of the intelligence we need to gather must be global. Think of COVID-19. Did we only want to know what's happening in Europe and ignore the rest of the world? Not at all. So we need data sharing, data trust to be global. Many companies that develop innovations are global. Clinical trials are conducted across the world. So really what we want is that we can help spearhead a momentum towards a global set of assurances to the public.
And picking up on the United Nations again, they have and are proposing a digital compact, almost borrowing one of our words. And we're not quite exactly sure what the content of that will be. It will come out in the next few months. But next year in 2024, the UN will have the Summit of the Future, which is looking at what things will replace SDGs. And for us, we want to try and champion this whole idea of a societal compact as a way of scaling data access for secondary use across the world. one of the other questions we've had is about who would sign a compact, and is it worth just teasing out the different types of people, because I think this is looking at the question from a perspective of individuals.
Well, at the moment, I think I can't say to you that every member of a particular sector has agreed, but when we were developing the compact and also undertaking early 2023 consultations, we had players that we engaged with from the pharma industry, from the medtech industry, from the big tech industry, from public health agencies, from academic bodies, from health professional bodies, and patient organizations, health ministries. Maybe I haven't remembered everybody, but I hope what you get a sense of is a very broad public-private spectrum. And by co-creating with them, we didn't just say, please read this and tell us if it's okay. We were co-developing with them and getting edits from them. Oh, I didn't mention data protection officers and legal experts as well. So what I hope is that what we have is something that a large number of people would be willing to sign right across the data using environment.
And I remember that a couple of the patient organizations also speculated on whether individuals would sign, and there was no objection or reason why individuals who want to do that. Indeed, there was a view that if we could create a groundswell up of individuals who wanted their data used and were happy to sign up to a compact, all the better. And I think that in the last session where Richard Bergstrom ended with somebody from Carolina Institute saying, I demand that my health data is used for secondary use, that's a way that those individuals could actually express that view by actually promoting and signing up to the compact.
Quite possibly. And I think that's very true, for sure. But okay. I think that the holy grail will actually be for data using organizations. Because if a large number of organizations sign up to it, firstly, I think others that didn't sign it initially will sign it because they'll realize it's really setting a standard for all data users across the public-private spectrum. And I think that will also permeate through to the public, who will then realize that these organizations are not just wanting to say in soft words, but actually willing to commit to being good users of data.
Fantastic. I think we've answered all of the questions that I can see. So it just forces me to say thank you so much for your time and for explaining with so much clarity what is not a straightforward concept, really, and something that we are very grateful to all of those stakeholders who participated in the whole of the Roundtable program, but specifically the last one looking at the Societal Compact, because it isn't just our original work, it is the work of the group in terms of trying to find a solution for health data sharing. So Dipak, thank you very much. And then I think that just leaves me to close day one of the summit.
Thank you, Bleddyn.
Thank you, Dipak. So I don't want to take too much of people's time, but I do have just a couple of reflections on things that I have heard today. I'm just checking that I'm still live. I think I am. Right. So a few closing remarks. The first thing is I really liked the discussion about from the German panel about the difference between a speedboat being nimble and finding solutions against the oil tanker that is likely to be the European health data space, and the speed with which it will have to move, given the length of time it will take to create the infrastructure and the various regulations at a member state level. Secondly, I was sort of amazed by the statistic from MedTech Europe that 97% of data in electronic health records are not being used. I liked the one patient's health data is another patient's medicine, which really struck a chord with me. Fourthly, then, the need for member states to rise above self-interest to allow the European collaboration to deliver EU competitiveness, whether that's in pharma or in secondary use research. And then finally, that whole question about individual patients demanding that their health data is used and trying to create a movement to ensure that we have health data sharing across Europe at scale for the benefit of every individual, whether they're a patient, whether it's a family member, or whether they're a carer. So with that, thank you all for your attendance today, and we look forward to seeing you on day 2 tomorrow. Thank you.